A very good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here. My name is Anviksha, and I will be moderating today's session for you. So I'm sure that you're all already aware of what this webinar is going to be about, but just to reiterate, today's session is going to be all about sustainability throughout any organization's supply chain activities. Now, as investors are also increasing their focus on sustainability data before making any key financial decisions. And on top of that, there are already more regulations that are constantly evolving, constantly coming up that are expecting numbers from supply chain emissions. So very recently, for example, even SEBI has mandated that starting from 2024 to 2025 onwards, top 250 companies will have to disclose their value chain data. And there are already other global frameworks existing that greatly emphasize on these supply chain emissions data. Now, what does that actually mean and why it is important to talk about? Because as important as the topic of environmental data and sustainability reporting is, it can be overwhelmingly tedious to get through the entire process of navigation of the regulatory requirements, understanding how and where to get the data from, and most importantly, how do you get the buy-in from all the stakeholders that are involved in the supply chain operations, and so on and so forth. So all things considered, I think we can establish that it is extremely important that we start putting more thought on this very subject. And for that, we are very privileged to have amongst us Mr. Sanjay Khare. Sanjay has been a former member of the executive board and chief of sustainability in big organizations like Skoda, Volkswagen, and Maruti for many years. And he has also served as many leadership positions and has driven multiple sustainability initiatives throughout his career. He's also an alumnus of IIT Kanpur and has decades of extensive experience in all things around sustainability. He's also a mentor at NSRCELIM Bangalore now, and he coaches many CEOs and boards as he continues his journey in sustainability. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things that each one of us can learn from him. So before we begin, just a few things I would like to mention, that once the presentation is over, we would be having a Q&A session. We have also collected a lot of questions through the registration forms that we sent out. So we will be taking those first. We'll be taking up those first. And during the presentation, if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat box. We will surely get to them as well. And once all of that is done, the floor will be open to the audience and for any live questions that there might be. So without any further ado, I kindly request Sanjay to please take over.
Yeah, thank you, Anviksha, and thanks a lot to SPRI for inviting me for this seminar and this area of my knowledge exchange, I think, and rightly done on a Teacher's Day. I'm quite privileged to be speaking on the Teacher's Day today. As already told by Anviksha that I have got a very sufficient background on this topic of sustainable value chain. At Skoda, which was my previous organization where I superannuated just earlier this year, I had very strongly implemented the sustainable value chain program, and we were the top ones amongst the various CIA rated companies. And right now with 50 organizations, we are leading this program around multiple topics. So I think I'll be the right person to talk to you on this topic, but I'll be more than happy to take any questions and answers that you'll have at the end of the session. So here the question is of the big picture, what is really making happen? So this is 1850s, when the fossil fuels started emerging into the world, that is the coal and then the oil. That's where the entire story started. To begin with, everything went on very, very well. We started our economy moving very fast and very well. We should see a huge amount of development happening around the world because of these fuels, which really made the energy available, it made the transportation available to each one of us. And that's what caused the economy to boom. Now, since late of the 1800s till date, almost 40 gigatons of emissions have been emitted into the atmosphere. And that reason is that because of this atmospheric emissions of CO2, the typical what you call glasshouse effect which has come over a greenhouse, somebody speaking, the greenhouse effect that has come is caused the warming to happen, and the temperature has gone by almost 1.5 degrees ever since this single thing has happened, and the temperature is going up every decade. And 1.5 degrees centigrade appears very simple thing, but it is not so, because this 1.5 degrees centigrade is average across the globe. Major part of it is happening in the northern hemisphere. The temperature has gone much ahead. I'll say the last station that I was staying in Pune, I moved there in 2016 and moved out in 2024. 8 years, I could see a major changes in the average temperatures and average ranges in that particular place, which was a very locally place. But the same thing is happening globally all over the world. And it's not just that, it's all about the CO2 concentrations, which is going up. In my own lifetime, in the last uh, few decades, the average level of CO2 concentration has gone almost to the highest level in the ppm level to almost 400 ppm, which was earlier that maybe around less than 200 ppm. So this level has been recognized very strongly. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this is where the governments have recognized. IPCC and many scientists had been highlighting this matter for a long time, that CO2 emissions are going to cause temperature rise on the earth, and that will lead to upheavals around. Now, this upheavals was recognized because of various scientific formulations, because of various events we could see. And then over the last I'll say almost more than 2 decades, since 1990, when the Rio agreement started. After that, till 2015, the Paris Climate Agreement happened, and that became a legally binding, type of agreement upon the various countries. Now, here in this treaties, which came into in the force on December 12, 2015. Over here, it came into force from 2016, November 4. Now, the main purpose was that we have to keep the global temperature rise below 2 degrees centigrade, above the pre-industrial levels, and with an effort to keep it limited to 1.5 degrees centigrade. What does it mean? That if we want to keep it to 1.5 degrees centigrade, we have to clip the emissions to maximum at 2025, and then after that we have to start reduction, which is a very tough task. So 1.5 degrees centigrade is a reality, and even 2 degrees centigrade will become a reality very soon, because that way the whole thing was supposed to go, it's yet not going. And that's why there's a pressure on all the governments all over the world. And this is a very interesting way in which the pressures have been put on the governments, that they compete with each other on a 5-yearly program, and they come up with improvements in their respective countries. Like India, also Mr. Modi, our honorable Prime Minister, went and really announced very clearly how exactly by 2030 we'll have 400 gigawatts of solar energy, and how much will be energy, energy agency will be improving in the country. So there were 5 pledges that the country has given. So because of that type of pledges happening, not just from India, but from all over the world, from all the countries who are coming and competing with each other on giving higher pledges, these targets are going to getting tighter and tighter. So can we come to the next slide? So because of this, there have been extreme weather events in the last few years, and that has caused the supply chain disruptions to happen. There has been resource scarcity causing, for example, in India, if we specific say, Chennai is one area where the floods have been happening, or there have been a droughts happening. And there's a big automotive industry hub. You've got Hyundai, you've got BMW, you've got Ashok Leyland, and multiple organizations. And because of these extreme weather events called either floods or cyclones, supply chain disruptions have been happening very strongly. And the supply chains are not located locally. Their supply chains are now global supply chains. For example, semiconductors. Now, semiconductor supply chain will be very complex supply chain, which will be getting maybe getting the semiconductor material coming from Taiwan, but will be processed somewhere in Malaysia, and then the machinery will be processed somewhere in Netherlands, and then will be coming to us in India. India also, we are starting in a big way in our own semiconductor program in the country. So these supply chains are very complex. A few years back, not few years, just a very recent time back, there was a big supply chain disruption happened because of the Suez Canal, where one particular ship got stuck up over there. Now, this happened because of man-made reason, but this can happen because of such things will happen because of the natural reasons also. Very recently in Slovenia, there were floods, and I'm in my own past company, Skoda. That particular company could not get the supplies done, so we had to supply the material from India, various parts, to make sure that their operations are running properly. Second area is about the resource scarcity. So again, as the matter of water, many beverages company in India or globally also, they are having this challenge of water, and they are not able to fulfill the requirements. Many states, for example, one Coca-Cola is one brand which has been in the news for this season. They have been able to manage this issue by multiple methodologies, but resource scarcity is another big challenge. Regulatory pressures and carbon taxes, particularly in India and the automotive industry, on the entire fleet emissions, there is a particular focus. That means if the average level of our carbon emissions per vehicle per kilometer is more than a certain level, there has to be a tax on that. Its present limit is 113 gram per kilometer of 113 gram of CO2 emissions per kilometer. If it goes to 117 grams, there's a tax of 25,000 rupees per car for how many number of cars they produce, which has to be given. And if it goes for another beyond 117 grams, it's going to be 50,000 rupees a car. It runs into millions and millions of euros or rupees, whatever the number we say that. So it runs in crores of rupees. This type of challenges are there on the companies to control their carbon emissions. And that's where it comes out as a pressure on their profit margins. Investor expectations for ESG. May suddenly stop operations, may suddenly come into profitability pressures, so they are not going to invest into it. And major corporations, are getting a lot of challenges coming during the annual general meetings globally, also India also, and globally. Globally, it's much more, particularly in say Europe and US developed world, where the annual general meetings are normally held by big organizations like Greenpeace and all, who will come and really put their expectations from the investor sides on ESG for these corporations. And there's a changing consumer preference. So today's date, I think all of us are doing multiple orderings for anybody, who people who are really well off now, most of them paying a bit of extra money. Paying a bit of extra money is not the challenge. So, and that's where people are more preferring if you're getting any material which is biodegradable material packaging, so which are recyclable packagings, people will prefer that, and they are preferring that also. And that's why you see, even whatever household supplies you're getting over here, either from Zomato or you're getting from say Swiggy here and there, you'll find all the packagings which are coming are reusable packagings and recyclable packaging. So that's something great that is happening. Next slide. So what is the value chain and the supply chain part? So in the broader terms of value chain starts from the cradle to the grave. I'll give an example. For example, a normal vehicle which is made a car, I'll take an example of a car which is a normally known object to everybody now. That car is made up of almost 70 to 80% of it is steel. Then there are plastics, then there are rubbers which are coming as a raw material. All this starts from mining or using a recycled material into that. Now, this recycled material is processed through multiple suppliers. Somebody is making steering, somebody making tires, somebody making various engine parts. And then all these things is assembled in an automotive plant. And after that, this assembly is done, then the car is handed over to the customer through the dealers. These dealers are providing lifetime support to the customer for servicing and everything. And once the customer has done right type of life of this vehicle, which is normally India right now, it's 15 years time, then this vehicle has to be put for the recycling part. And so that we are able to take what we call the way we use the word grave over here. So in fact, it's now cradle to cradle. So it means now we should, at the end of the life of a vehicle, how much a part of it can be used for recycling purposes, repurposed, that is where the value chain comes in. Now, this entire value chain, again, I'll take example of my automotive as a first one. So here, in-house emissions of which are directly manufacturing organizations emissions are 2%, and 13% emissions coming from the supply chain, from the suppliers the steel, plastics, metals, everything, and hoping almost 80% emissions go in the use phase. I'm talking of an internal combustion engine vehicle, which has been a popular thing till now, and almost 5% goes into the end of life recycling. Now, we'll in the next slide, we'll be talking about other industries also, what's happening over there. So there's a big responsibility in the entire phase. But what is something that we are focused today is about our upstream and downstream suppliers. So I'll take an example of my suppliers of my various components or my direct dealers. Customers, I'll leave it out from this scope today because that is what we are not controlling today. And so, and all this is important so that when our supply chain transparency is maintained, particularly with all this BRSR reporting, which has been talked just now by Anviksha, which is getting strong right now. It's mentioned only as 250 numbers right now of the top listed companies, but next year is 2027 is going to be top 1,000 listed companies. And after that, it's going to be 100% of all the listed companies have to do it. And they don't have to just report it, they also do a limited assurance on that topic. That means there will be a big business for even the various assurance companies to go and ensure that these data, whatever they are reporting, are the right data. So big scope that is going to come for the sustainability professionals also to ensure that these type of data are made by these organizations and then they are properly assessed and reported also rightly. So all this is in line with the global sustainability goals. I think we have talked earlier a little bit about what happened in the Paris Climate Agreement, but there are multiple other regulations. I think we'll be talking about a little later also. Next page. Yeah. So here we can see this scope. Oil and gas sector has got 10% in the scope 1 emissions. Scope 1 is all about what is energy we generate inside our plant and operations. Scope 2 is that is red color. Scope is about our purchased energy. And scope 3 is everything else, whether we buy the resources or we give it in the use phase, and that's where the emissions happen. In the steel industry, it is almost 66 to 67% is about the in-house emissions. What comes out in melting the steel and what comes out in processing of the steel. Transport, I've already talked about. It's almost 13 to 14% which is in the value chain. Construction, it is almost 7% is in the value chain and 91% is the use phase. The time the buildings we are staying into, that is where we are using it. Financial services, all about almost everything about the 99% is about financial services, which is in the scope 3 and where what is very, very important. And I'm finding a lot of pressures building up on companies like ABN AMRO and HSBC globally, who have got $3 trillion and more into various investments done globally. And I was talking to one of their MDs very recently based out of Hong Kong, and he was very clearly saying that we got a big, tremendous pressure coming from all our investors. And by the end of the decade, at least 1 trillion of their investments have to be green. That means they have to get out of the fossil fuels. They have to get out of the such sectors of investments, and they'll be moving only towards the greener investments. And by 2050, they have to be also into zero type of what you call financed emissions. Chemical industries has got almost 17% emissions, which are in the scope 1 emissions and in-house emissions. Cement has got a very large number, which is in-house emissions in manufacturing. The cement is very, very intensive on the energy aspects and materials aspects, and that's where almost 80% is into the in-house emissions. Same thing about the real estate and capital goods, which is 93% is into the scope 3 emissions. Next slide. Yes, so here now we will be talking very much about understanding this complexity, what type of various acts and regulations have come up globally. SEC is a US-related climate disclosures. Public companies which have issued securities to the public and are required to file periodic reports with the SEC. Foreign private issuers, which are the non-US companies and securities listed on US exchange, they also have to report. And same thing about the emerging growth companies, which meet a certain size revenue criteria and are eligible for certain exemptions from the SEC rules. TCFD has dominantly been the UK. It's a task force on climate-related financial disclosures, dominantly voluntary. Then LKSG is the one, because I've been working for the German organization, so I know very well how strong and appreciative it is. Question is, can I appreciate if you can focus more on explaining how to implement it? Yeah, I'll talk about this topic. Don't worry. We'll talk about this topic. And we've got enough time. I'll be dwelling on this topic. So this law applies to the global companies, operations of the German companies who have got more than 3,000 employees. And from 2024, it will apply also to 1,000 companies. I mean, companies with 1,000 employees only. France has got certain laws on this topic. CSRD is a big area to work upon with the large US companies where they have got certain turnover of at least $40 million. They have to start reporting these things. And I remember very well that how strongly we were working in the Volkswagen group and Skoda groups to work on the CSRD compliances. CBAM is another rule which has come up. So suppose you're not operating in India, but you are exporting some things to, say, Europe. So their cross-border adjustment mechanism has come. So many of their corporations would like to do that, if okay, because they are under a lot of pressure to use and minimize the emissions. Why not they buy the source the material from the say Far East, from India, or say Southeast Asia. So here, whatever amount of steel or XYZ item we export to Europe, they'll be doing a carbon accounting of that. What is the embedded emissions into that? And then it will be taxed accordingly. So this is where the challenges were lying. And I think we have already talked enough about the BRSR core. So I think we can jump to the next page. Yeah. So in the BRSR core, so once you were starting about exactly how do we drive it in the value chain, we need to understand that what exactly does it encompass? What exactly do they need to do really? So first of all, we need to understand that it's not that we are doing it for somebody else. If you do something like this of compliance to the environmental causes, social causes, or governance issues, we are doing it for our own betterment, because ultimately this global warming which is going to happen, and that's happening in the face of a much more expanding population. The population was just 1 billion before the beginning of the 20th century, and right now it's almost 8 billions. While the resources have really coming down. So there has been a big requirement that everybody needs the same amount of energy, same amount of education, same amount of healthcare, same amount of transportation needs, because everybody is very, very well connected today. So everybody has got needs and wants which they need to do, and the resources are limited. So ultimately, sustainability is all about growing the economy without putting any pressure on the resources. So there are three components to it. And there have been three challenges. Certainly, one part was the climate change that is causing the global warming. Second was about the rising of inequalities. Inequalities in the world, that's where the social part has come up, that how do we make sure that all this development is available equally to everybody? And third part was all about the natural resources which are dwindling. So ultimately, we have to do the development without further extracting anything out of the earth. In fact, how do we recharge the earth, whatever we have extracted till now? That's the third part of the challenge. So here, SEBI has asked that we find out what is the, as per the Pareto chart, you can say that whatever is the most impacting part of our purchases, say 75%, where does the purchases coming out of it? We should consider those parties in our upstream and downstream partners, whether it's upstream suppliers or downstream logistics partner or dealers. We have to ensure that these people are compliant. Now, what is important for the compliance? We have to know the greenhouse gas footprint of them. How much is the energy that they are consuming, whether that's green energy or that's a gray energy? What is the type of emissions they are having? Number two, what is their water footprint? What is their energy footprint? And what is their waste management methodologies? Are they able to reuse and recycle all the waste, or it's going to the landfills? Second area is about the social area. Social area, whether employee well-being and safety. Safety is a very, very important concern in India, particularly if you go to the tier 3 and tier 4 levels, where I feel the level of respect given to the partners is not so high. We keep on getting accidents, and that's where it has been kept high, that how much is your investments on safety and what has been your accident records. It's also because I've worked very closely in this field, I know that one fatality happening is going to cost almost 4.3 crores to a company, besides the value loss with the loss of the precious life. It's a huge cost that happens to the organization. Loss of efficiency, loss of respect, everything. Safety becomes a very important area. Gender diversity in business is an important area which is to be reported also. What is the inclusive development you're doing? What is the value creation you're doing for the small vendors? Job creation in the smaller towns, even that is to be reported. And third part is about the engagement with customers and suppliers, disclose of data breaches and account payables, openness of the business on various topics of various purchases, sales, are where they are really concentrated upon. Yeah, I think this is the slide I was talking in much more details right now about that. How are we really, opening our thoughts on around the ethics and around the governance issues. I think these are the cores. And just we go back to the previous slide once. So all these things we need to really collect for our own directly mother company as well as in the value chain companies. And then this whole thing has to be reported to SEBI in a proper reporting format, which very detailed papers are available from SEBI websites. You can see it also. The Spring people can also help you into getting that things. And this has to be done. And as mentioned very clearly, there has to be limited assurance of the work on comply or explains this on financial year 2025-26, which will become into reasonable assurance after some time. I'll give you an example of what happened to CSR laws in India. CSR, I mean, I've headed the CSR committees of my organization also. CSR started in India in 2014 through the Companies Act, and there it was a very limited amount of companies which were starting the whole thing with certain amount of turnover, and only few companies were really were really forced to comply with it. But today's date, it's reached to 100% of the companies. So you have to plow back 2% of your average profits for the last 3 years back into this societies that you are serving. You can choose any of the areas. So same way, ESG disclosures are going to get tougher and tougher because our governments are also under pressure by the international partners. They're also committing. So obviously, everything will be coming down through the state governments and the central governments on the corporations to do. And there's a big competitiveness which is built up into this whole process. Next slide. I think we have covered this slide. So here, I think what exactly we can talk about, I think this very specific question was there, that how do we implement in our suppliers? So for any part of any implementation, there are two parts. Number one is will, and number two is skill. Will and skill are two important areas to talk upon. Number one is about building the motivation, building the right vision, mission. I think we'll talk a little more later about it. But first of all, it has to be embedded into the mother organization that we need to do it. It's important to take out those commitments. For example, there's a very strong program from my own company, Skoda and Volkswagen, which I was working for a long time. Globally, we have got a mission mission go to zero by 2050, where you want to become totally, absolutely resource neutral, whether it's tailpipe emissions or whether it's resource extraction. So that type of initiative is there, and that's been divided into various parts around how do we do resource saving, and how do we do regeneration of nature, and how do we become decarbonized company. In fact, that whole program has been changed into a new name called Regenerate Plus program. How do we regenerate the earth? That is where the new topic the top corporations are talking about. Same thing about Amazon, it's a Shipment Zero initiative. Apple had come up with a very strong program on supplier clean energy, and they came up with very strong, I think, Apple i15 Pro and other what that time were launched. How they installed that everything inside that is 100% recycled aluminum or titanium, and how their entire operations, their offices, their factories, they're becoming carbon neutral. Mahindra has got a very strong green steel and supply chain collaboration program. Tata's people, because automotive industry, I'm connected to almost everybody. I know very well everybody, whether Tata, Maruti, Mahindra, Skoda, Hero Honda, TVS, they have got a very tremendous program. Volvo has got a wonderful sustainability car program. ITCC is a very, very responsible company, very big. Speaking into words. Same way, I know that, I mean, I've been in the industry for the last 40 years, and there have been a lot of challenges coming into the area of productivity first. Then came the quality issues. I remember very clear about 1990s, the quality of the vehicles, all the white goods which are coming to the market were not perfect. But today's date, quality is taken granted. It happened because over the years, all the industry have worked hand in hand with the suppliers, and tier one supplier, tier two supplier, tier three suppliers, to raise the level of knowledge, to raise the level of capacity and capabilities. And that's how this whole thing has happened. But ultimately, it has to start from within. Your own board has to be very committed about it. There has to be very visibly demonstrated leadership inside the organization, and then only we can have got a moral and ethical courage to talk to our suppliers. So first, I mean, even I demonstrated that way in Skoda, first in-house, and then we started going to our suppliers. Next page, please. So what are the key drivers on this topic? Give me a minute. So investor scrutiny, I think we already talked about a little bit earlier, that how quickly investors are forcing us to uh, uh, I'll give an example of how the annual general meetings are getting really controlled by these various organizations like Greenpeace and all. Then comes the stakeholder impact. The stakeholders are the organizations area. I mean, everybody who's really, connected to us for the business is our stakeholder. They have got even our employees, our own stakeholders. Even the various communities around us are the stakeholders, and they demand for it that you cannot emit bad water into the atmosphere, you cannot emit bad air into the atmosphere because it's affecting the villages nearby. There's a very strong regulatory ask today. I just talked about the regulations which are there globally and locally also. Corporate accountability also, we just right now mentioned about that. Corporates are accountable to the governments and to the shareholders. And this is a bigger word to talk about. How do we take the competitive advantage by becoming decarbonized, by becoming a circular organization in our manufacturing, in our products, and then how we come to those products which are becoming regeneration products, which are regenerating the earth. And how do we bring the benefits to the bottom of the pyramid for everybody equally for the globe? So this is where the competitive advantage of the future corporations is going to be. If you see very clearly, there are multiple top companies in India who have focused on things like green hydrogen in India, because they know that by 2030 or beyond, this will be the right fuels. They will be working on those areas. So they are working on these operations, these particular new innovations. I know I'm working very closely on this topic along with NSRCL and T-Hub Hyderabad on what are the innovations happening in the area of sustainability. Because, and everybody, each and every organization, big organization, they are pumping a lot of money into these innovations, because I know because they know that these are going to be the areas of competitive advantage for them for the future. Risk management, obviously, we de-risk ourselves from the vagaries of the nature, the vagaries of vagaries of the global warming, which come onto our supply chain. Employee pressure, certainly, any employees today days, youngsters particularly, they're very, very prone to move around here and there, but all the talent, if we want to retain, we have to show them this, that yes, you are working for a responsible company. And consumer pressure, we already talked about. Next page. So now that's where a question comes on, how do we really ensure that data is properly managed? Because we have to collect data from 75% of organizations, internally also as well externally. So I had gone through a very strong program in my organization where I started first with 15 dealers, so 15 suppliers and dealers in-house, and then we moved to 50 of them in 2024. And also Volkswagen as a group has recognized that they got 1 million 10 lakh suppliers globally. Out of that, almost 60,000 are tier 1 suppliers. And we rolled out a very specific program globally of measuring the level of sustainability, and they call that the sustainability index for every organization. Every supplier in our global system was supposed to be having a sustainability index, because that was submitted from their own side on their self-assessment. Then we had some third-party partners would go and verify that. And based upon that, we would segregate them into category A, category B, and category C. And there was always a pressure on category C people to come to category B and category B to remain in category A. And this type of pressures were building up on each one of them. Hold on. Yeah. So this data collection on all these topics of environment, on topics of safety, social, as well as governance topics, there have to be same set of parameters, same type of standardized metrics and formats which we need to collect data. And we have to encourage suppliers to participate in sustainability reporting and data sharing. So how I did it was early. I'll remember way back in 2020, just after the 2021 around COVID time, we started talking to suppliers, and one of the annual supplier meet, I personally took almost half an hour of call along with them. Not call, it was a proper talk to them, telling them on the positives and negatives of this whole program, enrolling them on the task, their leadership on the task, that yes, they will be able to drive it. And once they're able to drive such a program, they become a preferred supplier. Being a board member and then talking on this type of stage, I think it was very well received. I think immediately after the program, I got at least 15 suppliers coming to me, said that they are very, very eager to do it. And that's how we have to start with I mean, like any other motivational program, any other leadership program, any other change management program, whether on quality or on productivity or on cost, this has to be a structured program which has to be driven from our company sides, and also join into various what you call cohorts on this topic. For example, lack of technology integrations is very, very challenging area, because the time this data becomes very complex, where you're moving with multiple organizations, standardizations. It's always good to have an app or a technology-based tool available to you on which this data can be collected. You will get a lot of problems to begin with, because in most of the tier 2 companies, tier 3 companies, you'll not have any person who will be able to report the data even. You have to really educate them over the first few months on. I mean, I remember we were doing a weekly call with them, face to face, offline, online, and explaining them, understanding them. Okay, at least start collecting your bills, electricity bills. Once you store the bill, okay, we'll come to know how much of that is the gray energy, how much that is the green energy, and convert that into GHG emissions. It requires a lot of hand holding. And then after some time of the hand holding, once the data starts coming in, that's where technology integration will become easy, will make the life easy for the operation part. Next slide. Next slide, please. So I think standardize the global tech solutions, phase plan to prove value and drive change, educate and I think I would talk about educate, incentivize, and empower for supplier success. I'll take an example. In 2023 September, I took my 15 suppliers and dealers along with me to New Delhi to the CIS National Conference. And because these people had participated very well in my program, supported with data, and not just that, they had made a lot of improvements. Anywhere we would go, they were all working on renewable energy on the rooftops. In my own organization, I had installed 18.8 megawatts of solar power on an OPEX model, wherein I was able to get this energy at 3 rupees 60 paisa a unit instead of buying it 8 rupees 50 paisa a unit. Same thing our suppliers did. Everybody was very busy into tree plantation. Everybody wanted to become a zero waste organization, which I also became in my company. We became a zero waste to landfill company to ensure that each and everything is repurposed, convert everything into usable thing. And then we became even a zero liquid discharge, water positive company, and that's what we drove into our value chain. We became very strong on our CSR front. Whatever amount of water we consumed inside, 120% of that we consumed in the societies around us, and that's what our suppliers did. And all these things we recognize them. I mean, taking their top management to Delhi and making sure that they share a big stage along with us in the CII's national meet. This was a big level to method to incentivize, and the result was that next year we got 50 enrollments, and I'm very sure very soon this number will become 150 in the next year. Next slide. It's 1542. I think we already talked about this areas about vision, awareness, and technology. We need to have a very focused vision of any organization. For example, I mean, sustainable mobility is a word which my organization used to talk about, or say any organization in say, for example, this company into forgetting the name of the company right now. Any company into building materials will also say that let's make the green building. You'll find all the ads coming on buildings and materials coming about the green buildings. But ultimately, we have to form a vision about. I told you that we have got regenerate plus vision. So this is the area about making the right vision, creating the right awareness within your organization and outside your organization. In my organization, people said that, I mean, everything starts from me. It doesn't start from somebody else. I'll personally take a pledge that I'll walk down to the nearby corner store, and that's why I'll be saving 114 gram per kilometer of CO2 emissions. Instead of taking a car, I'll simply walk down, or carry a cloth bag along with me. So these are small pledges. Or I'll put my AC temperature to less than 24, so about 24 degrees. So this type of things will make me that I am personally conscious about it. Then I start spreading awareness within my company, within my value chain. And third thing is use and leverage the technology. I think these are three pillars that we are talking about. Next slide. So define, articulate a clear, inspiring sustainability vision. Ensure that your sustainability vision aligns with the corporate goals and missions. Align your suppliers with your sustainability vision by getting their buy-in. Same as any other vision that's created, but make sure that sustainability becomes your boards are properly educated on this topic and they are very well aligned on this topic. Develop multiple strategies to actively involve and motivate the suppliers. I told you a number of examples right now. How did I involve and motivate them? best practice to ease in transitions and manage the resistance. So I think education always helps in reducing the resistance. Also incentivizing that, rewarding them for the good job is very, very important. You will be having people from your west, north, south, east, and your local suppliers. They'll have different preferences, different offers. Work according to that. Leverage technologies. Today's technology is, easily available with the new techniques, also AI, ML, everything coming up, everything is much faster to do. Use that and let them know about it, how exactly it's going to help them out, how exactly it's going to make their job easier. Showcase success stories. So we have started sharing the stories. Okay, this particular company, say XYZ Motors company, our dealers, he has got 75% as a renewable energy. He is using 74% water, which is totally recycled. And then share this knowledge. Okay, this plastic OEM, they are using 90% of recycled plastics into their operations, into their packaging materials. So all these things were sharing was important, very helpful. Continuously monitor and evaluate. Empower team with skills, very important. And also in Skoda, I had made one specific program that along with my MD, 5% of the board's what you call evaluation of the year was on the sustainability functions. There was a sustainability index made, and the sustainability index, whether of internal operations or to the value chain operations or the CSR or future programs, innovation programs, there was specific metrics, and the time it was getting, coming into their monetary compensations, it was specifically focused information to them that yes, it matters a lot. Next page. So I think we have talked a lot about these topics: financial benefit, sustainability, role of environmental data and sustainable supply chains, leveraging data analysis, creating actionable plans based on data, aligning suppliers, enhancing supplier competitiveness. Now, this is an important word. Time my suppliers who have gone through this program, they have become competitive in the terms that now they are preferred suppliers, not just for me, but they're suppliers for Tata's also, and Mahindra's also, and Maruti also, and BMW also, and Toyota also. Because if you raise their level, they become much more competitive in the market. They know this. And then with nurturing culture of ongoing education and support, nowadays, lots of programs are possible and are available through online programs. You need not go physically to somebody's place always. You can, yes, once or two physical program in a year is okay, but most of it is able to do online. So next slide. I think we have just talked about these topics, that why technology usage improves the visibility of the data, improves the operational efficiency, improves the accountability, because you know that earlier things were getting recorded in Excel and then being sent to XYZ person on the mail and all. But once the data is, I remember in my Volkswagen group globally, we got 120 plants from various locations, whether Germany or Mexico or South Africa or India. We were asked, okay, whatever you do, but ultimately you have to use the system and enter the data over there. So I am accountable for the data which is being entered over there, whether on emissions or the water or the waste. Communication becomes much easier because everything is at a stroke of a button. You can do all the benchmarking of data available, transparency comes, and they are standardized data formats. So technology certainly helps. But certainly technology will come into the place at the next level. First, you have to build awareness. First, you have to take the vision to a higher level. Next. So you can do this type of reportings can come out. Okay, 75% supply chain emissions are coming from 9 vendors. So let's focus only on the 9 vendors. Spend based 26%, 26 vendors have got 22.30 crores of my emissions. Sorry, of my spends, from which we have got the estimated emissions of 756 tons. So that's how we can really compare and find out where to really focus upon. This type of data collection is going to be helpful. Which is the companies, for example, Seroco India or Meta Water or Jashi Infosys, where we can define, okay, this company is into high risk zone. Let's focus on them. Let's try to upgrade, because I know that I'm totally interdependent upon my suppliers, because if they are not able, they are not competitive, they're into risk, I'm going to be into the risks. Next page. Same way, standardized data formats, for example, all these topics of GHG, water, energy, waste, social topics, as well as governance topics, they will be coming into some standard formats. And this will really be helpful for me to report the data to BRSR Core. Also help me to really work with them in making their improvement program. So I remember in Skoda, we had collected data for all our suppliers and also all our dealers. I'm talking about green retail program. They were supplying from 5 major brands: Skoda, Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, and Lamborghini. And first year, we could see that almost 50% of them could not submit the data. But next year, this improvement happened. We got almost 70% data. Then we did multiple type of analysis. What is the energy footprint per square foot? What is energy footprint per car? What is the energy footprint per customer? And then how to compare what is the renewable sort of that? And then how to make improvements in the whole process. It was really very, very interesting process to undergo and really full of economic benefits also. Next page. I think this is the crux of the entire process. Once we have collected data, how do we make improvements? This question was asked, how do we drive it? How do we make improvements? Work on topics like energy efficiency. Now, what is energy efficiency? For example, you can install, which have already moved from HPMV lamps and tube lights to LEDs. At Skoda, we have done it 3 years back. 100% lighting is only on LEDs. Find out where exactly is the energy wastages happening. Many times it happens that the new plants which are created, they are created with a lot of surplus type of safeties of the design. For example, a motor where requirement is only 2 kilowatt, a designer would put 5 kilowatt meter motor for the safety. The rest of the energy is going waste. Can we change the motor to a 2 kilowatt motor? Okay, if there's a big motor of say 75 kilowatt which is operating in a water treatment plant, no, it's not required to work all the time on high speed. Can we put a VV, a variable voltage, very frequency inverter over there to control the speed and accordingly control the efficiency? There can be a number of methods to find out how do you make your place energy efficient place. You give out the same results, but does not use excessive amount of energy. Waste reduction is another area. For example, sealers, there are multiple sealers used in the car. Now, what would happen is a drum comes of 20-liter drum. At the end of it, almost 10% was getting waste because of water. It was getting sucked by an automatic pump, with Graco pump. Now, this 10% was going waste and getting wasted. At time we created a lot of awareness amongst our operators. They said, no, sir, we'll collect even the last 10% of the sealer and reuse it. And they could collect from the 10 drums into one drum, and then that's why we started finding that the waste reduction was perfect. If you send everything by a say ICE engine vehicle, there are a lot of emissions. Can we change over to a say CNG vehicle or to electric vehicle or say multimodal transport? Can sometimes be a shipping be used, sometimes a railway be used, and sometimes a car be used. For example, in my recent travel to Pune, I used. I obviously didn't have a car, but I took an Uber for some time. Sometimes used an Uber auto, sometimes used a metro. Sometimes I walked, and I found that everything was possible to do at minimum amount of emissions. Lean manufacturing certainly is a big area to work upon. How exactly we go in our whole processes, how do we cut out the wastages? There are some 7 methods of wastage elimination in the lean manufacturing process tool. Reduce is all about how do we come over to substitute the energy to renewable energy. How do we substitute the material to greener materials, bring sustainable technologies? Last but not the least, I think this area is developing much more in India now. A lot of regulations coming up on the offsetting part. How do we really do the carbon capture? How do we really say one particular sector of say energy sector or say steel sector? Now in this cohort, if somebody is able to improve upon the energy efficiency, how exactly has got excess amount of carbon certificates and then how we can sell it out. So all these are the areas where we can work upon and go ahead. So I think enough time we have taken. We got some time. We can take some questions now.
Thank you so much, Sanjay sir. As you already said, first of all, thank you for the very well detailed and very comprehensive presentation. I'm sure everybody is buzzing with questions. So yeah, we'll take up the questions. We had intended the webinar to be interactive, and I see there's a lot of questions in the chat as well. As I already said, we have a few questions from the registration form, so we'll be taking that up. Mihika, I would like my colleague to please take over and present the questions to Sanjay sir.
Okay, hello everyone. So now we will be taking up the questions that were sent to us via the registration form. So the first question is, from an ESG perspective, what should be the criteria on which suppliers should be evaluated?
I think we have already detailed, very well detailed just right now. I mean, if you start only in India, say, they're very clearly environmental criteria, very clear social criteria, and very clear governance criteria. As simple as that. What is their emission per, I mean, whatever products I use, I mean, use a what called specific emissions, not just the total emissions, use a what called specific emissions. For example, I mean, take any sector. I mean, again, I take an example of my sector called car manufacturing. I say, I mean, in my own company, everything is measured in terms of energy per car, CO2 emissions per car, water per car, waste generated per car, or VOC emissions per car. Same way, if I talk to my supplier, a supplier who's supplying steering wheels, well, I'll ask him, okay, what is your emission per steering wheel? That is devoted to my supplies, because he's the same supplier to other automotive OEMs also. For me, it will be indexed that, okay, what is his specific measurement on the emissions? Specific on energy efficiency, specific on water, on waste. Same thing on the social parameters. What is your diversity level? What is your employee awareness program on safety? What is your accident levels? Same thing on the governance parameters that we have just listed out. So these are the basic levels on which we can measure the suppliers and verify them and also rate them. Hope I'm able to answer this question.
Yes. So, okay. So the second question is also related to suppliers. So how can companies engage and motivate small scale suppliers who may lack ESG knowledge or data recording practices to align with their ESG initiatives and reporting requirements? And what kind of strategies would you suggest for building an emissions inventory and driving action in such scenarios?
I think I have already covered this thing again in this presentation only. See, everything has to start with your internal commitments first, your own vision first, your internal vision that we have to drive this whole thought process. Make education, make awareness amongst your suppliers that how it's important to them. Ensure that they have a structure in their place. There's somebody assigned in their place who can really work on this topic. Because this is very important, because everything is a cost for them. They will not put anybody in the place because it's a cost for them, which we as the original manufacturer have to bear it ultimately, or the customer we as a customer have to bear it. We have to demand out of them, we demand them out of this matrix which I just talked about. Okay, what is the specific level of consumption? For example, if today's date we as a supplier want to supply to say Europe, they as a customer tell us, okay, what is your embedded emissions? And immediately my embedded emissions come under control. Same way, if we start asking our suppliers, what exactly is your level of emissions, embedded emissions, they'll certainly control it. Maybe not today, maybe over a period of time.
Right. So building onto that, like what steps should be taken if suppliers refuse to participate or share data, and how should we handle supplier partners who provide on-site services?
Okay. First of all, I'm happy to see my teacher over here, Alexi Katekachis from Germany. Hi, Alexis. He is the one who brought me into the practice of sustainability 4 years back. And he was my teacher over there in the Volkswagen program. So very happy to see you, Alexis.
Thank you much. Too much honor. Thanks.
Thanks. So yeah, can you just repeat the question once? I was very happy to see Alexis and forgot the question.
So the question is, what steps should be taken if suppliers refuse to participate or share data, and how should we handle supply partners who provide on-site services?
So again, it's a simple question of motivation. If you are totally dependent upon that supplier, you cannot control that. You reduce the dependence. You have multiple suppliers. The way you control their cost and way you control the quality, the same way you have to control their sustainability. As simple as that. So always find alternate dealers. Like as an automotive company, for everything, we try to ensure that we've got best of two at least 2 or 3 suppliers for each and every component. then you can make them compete amongst each other. But if you're totally dependent upon them, it will not happen. One challenge is coming today, really happening in a big way. If we're importing things from China, Chinese people are not very open to share their data. You have to develop the capabilities in-house. You have to develop the alternate capabilities, alternate suppliers, and only this will help. Otherwise, it will be a big challenge to do it. This problem is certainly there. And that's where we see that we start, like I gave an example how I started with my top 15 suppliers, encouraged them, brought them on a higher pedestal, and seeing them how others got motivated. So it's a standard process of how do we build leadership, how do we do change management, how do we bring motivation. It's a topic much beyond the very narrow area of only sustainability. It's beyond the overall leadership qualities which an organization can demonstrate, either in their vision or in their actions.
Okay. So the next question is, how do you define value chain partners for a financial services company such as a bank?
I gave a very clear example. If just see what is the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3. Say for a bank, say I'll take an example of big bank in India like a State Bank of India or ICICI Bank. Now they have got their operations all over the country, each and every nook and corner, even internationally they'll have branches. They'll be having their own servers and their own data which is getting managed. So all this is a part of their scope 1 emissions, and which will be not more than 1 or 2%. There will be something, they will be purchasing energy from outside that will become a part of scope 2 emissions. Again, 1% maximum. I'm hoping 97 to 98% of emissions are embedded into their customers and into their various lendees, people to whom they have financed the emissions. I gave an example of HSBC Bank, ABN AMRO Bank, where $3 trillion is invested into various investments or into loans. Now, all these things have to be converted into those organizations which are green. That is where the area lies, that we have to understand where exactly our financed emissions are lying. That is what is all about the financial services. In India, as of now, there's not so much pressure, but I think Alexis can very well tell how much pressure is in the Europe right now on having the green emissions into the finance industry. Yeah.
Right. So our next question is, our current focus is on disclosures from value chain partners to understand the company's status. But how can we effectively influence such sustainability related decisions?
Again, it's a repetition. See, bring it a part of your, because their annual suppliers rate, rating comes out on their various parameter, on their quality, on their cost, on their delivery, on their safety, morale, and put sustainability as a parameter to that. Based upon that, same way as we rank students in the class, in a board, in an examination, same way start ranking them. Whatever gets measured gets controlled. So once they come to know that this is a parameter which is getting measured and they are getting monitored by the customer, they'll control it. I give an example, if EU measures our embedded emissions, we will control it. Same way, once they know that our customer wants this change happen, they will do it.
Okay.
Maybe the process of change takes time. It will not happen instantly. Maybe there will be initially some responses because everybody is conditioned to work in a certain way. It will happen over 1 year, 2 years, 3 years time, but it will happen once you start demanding. Like BRSR, they demanded in a soft way. India CSR Act, they demanded in a soft way, but slowly, every year they will be tightening the noose and everybody will get aligned.
Right. Okay, so now we'll be moving on to the questions from the live chat. Please continue sending them in. We'll cover as many as we can. So the first one is, shouldn't CSR get merged with ESG/green financing?
See, try to understand what exactly is CSR and what is ESG and green financing. CSR is something very, very focused on the Indian regulations, that they wanted that Indian companies should become a part of developing the societies around them. They should not be focused only inside work. They should be focused on the societies around them. And they made a regulation around 2% of our profit should be plowed back into the development of the society. And it's a very, very small amount. You know how much is the entire India's CSR budgets? Less than 25 lakh crores rupees. It's not a very big amount. Only thing they wanted that industry should pump in their knowledge, their acumen to make big changes happen into and make those type of programs which maybe the governments and others can further copy. For example, GSW has come up with a wonderful program on developing sports people, Olympics program. I mean, developing OGQ is another program, Olympic Gold Quest is a program on the sports. Then there are people who are developing on education, those special good islands, where the corporate energy is coming and supporting the nearby societies. And also wherever I'll say all these our mining and metal companies are operating in the remote regions, yet they are, I mean, very well supporting the nearby organizations in developing themselves. They are nearby societies in developing it. So merging ESG and merging CSR, there are two independent areas, I'll say. ESG is a lens to be seen by the various investors. And CSR is what you are doing something out of your own feeling good that yes, we are doing good and let's support the society around us. ESG is a parameter on which various investors are going to rate us. Hope I am able to answer the question.
Yes. So the second question is, how much emission per kilometer is allowed in India?
I'd give an example, 114 gram per kilometer is the ceiling over here. And I think Europe, it's 99 grams. So that's why they are pushing hard towards electric vehicles.
Okay. So the next question is there any latest update / revision and clause from SEBI on BRSR Core Assurance for 75% of value chain?
Come again, please.
The question is there any latest update / revision in clause from SEBI on BRSR Core Assurance for 75% of value chain?
I think you can see it. I mean, if there is something latest, I mean, whatever latest information I had, I have already disclosed it already here. But you can see it on the BRSR website and get some more information. But 75% by the valuation of the business, that is what needs to be reported as of now.
Okay, so now I think we'll open the floor for a few live questions from our audience.
Okay, let me see the chat myself and see if there is something where I can answer. So there's a question, does Volkswagen engage with tier 2, tier 3 suppliers directly, or is it that the responsibilities are cascaded onto tier 1 suppliers? Yes, we deal directly with tier 1 suppliers only, not with tier 2 or tier 3. It's responsibility of tier 1 now to deal with tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers. Can NGO partners be included as value chain partners? I don't know what sector you are from and which sector you're talking about. Exactly, are you from the social sector? Exactly which sector you are into? Totally depend upon which sector you're operating into. Exactly in the value chain, whether it's really 75% of your what you call revenues which are coming, and these NGO partners are an important part of that revenue, I would think you should include them. Any other question? Can you please brief us more with the water footprint topic regarding the criteria points? So water has got two specific areas, quality and quantity both. So whatever amount of water that we are using, consuming inside, and then we are how we are disposing it, whatever the wastewater, that's the important area. How whether various parameters like it's TSS or BOD and COD, that is oxygen demand, biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand, everything's under control. And then what you are doing with the wastewater, are you throwing it into the water bodies outside into the rivers, or you are repurposing it inside for the gardening purposes? So if you're repurposing inside, like this, what we used to do in our Skoda operations, 100% water was recycled and repurposed and send it inside for the gardening purposes. And then every year you would check the quality of the soil, what's the level of salts and what's the level of minerals, is it increasing or not? And we found it was the perfect level. The one is about the quality part. Second thing is about the quantity part. So how much of the water that you are bringing in, it's totally from the fresh water sources. That is what you have to measure, and that you have to put into a specific mode. How much, like in a car operations there, how much is the fresh harvesting? And once we do rainwater harvesting, obviously you take permissions from the Pollution Control Board. Once we take in the permissions, then we could find that yes, out of every year, almost 600 meter cube of water we could take from the rainwater harvested sources. So this is the way, it's a simple accounting process. How much water from the freshwater sources, how much from the recycled water sources, how much is water you are repurposing and recycling within the operations. There are multiple cleaning operations inside the paint shops. Can the recycled water, be used in some other part of the operations? That's how the entire water coating is to happen. And then we went around to our nearby societies, and the time we were conserving water with them, we came to know that the water conservation that we do with them can help us to get a water positive score. And we applied for water positive score, and then some certifying agency came and certified us as a water positive. So that was a water topic. Any other questions? I think.
So I think thank you so much, sir. I think we have taken a lot of questions from the chat and the registration form, and due to time constraint, we will be moving on to live question and answer. People whose questions have not been answered, we will definitely get in touch with you later on, and all of your questions shall be answered. But now I request anybody from the audience who has a question that they want to pose, please go ahead.
Sir, I'm Manan Gupta. So I'm from a company called Maxoff. So I have a question. Like, we have now started our ESG journey, and most of our suppliers are small and medium scale enterprises suppliers. So the only question what I have is, how do I motivate them to move to the path of sustainability? Because sometimes it also requires some investment in the efforts.
So I think best is where there is no investment is education. Giving them awareness, giving them education, making sure that their top management is involved in a commitment program. You make a commitment from your organization. There are multiple possibilities. You can join the CII's program on this commitment is there, which is totally free. You can join and you can make your suppliers, CEOs join that program. Once they sign on that climate, what you call climate collaborative or climate agreement or that climate commitment, it becomes a commitment to them. They will not do anything with the first year, maybe in the second year they'll do it. Once they find it's hanging on their wall and they have signed some paper. For example, in my company, 10 years back, a biodiversity agreement was signed and kept over there. But at some point of time, you start feeling that, no, we have signed a paper and let's do it. That's one way, because until you involve the top management, it will not really happen at all. Second is on the bottom level, on the medium level, a lot of it is possible through awareness. I think I started this whole thing as a single man. I didn't have any team in my company for this, but then we built a big team around because of this motivation that as an inner driver that you can bring as a lighthouse, you can bring a lot of people will come to you. It doesn't really cost you anything. You have to really, today's date, giving knowledge is free. I mean, what does it cost to have a 40-minute Zoom call, which is for free? Or say Google Meet call, which is for free. You get knowledge, share that knowledge, maybe once in a month, once in a week, once in a fortnight, you can program. Start giving slow knowledge, start with collecting knowledge. Today's even getting knowledge is free on multiple programs. I think this is where the whole thing starts. Create a vision, create awareness. Once the level builds up, come to technology levels, come to improvement levels, come to Kaizen programs, come to motivation programs. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Do we have any other questions from anybody from the audience? Okay, I think we are done with the question and answer session. So with that, we come to an end with for our webinar as well. My very heartiest gratitude to everybody who has been a participant, has asked questions, has a very big thank you to Sanjay sir for this all-encompassing discussion and presentation. As promised, the links to the webinar video and presentation slides will be shared with all of you, and you will have access to both of these at your end. And before everyone moves out, I would also like to mention that we will have a survey form for this webinar feedback, and I kindly request everybody to take that survey. We'll float it around through email as well and through chat box as well. It should not take more than a minute, and if you have any more questions, queries, comments, concerns, please feel free to reach out to us at the contact details that are given on your screen. And once again, thank you to everyone who has been a part of this webinar.
Yeah. And just I'm available on LinkedIn. You can very well find me, Sanjay Khare, ex-Skoda, Volkswagen. You can type out and find my name. And if who are interested can follow me or connect to me. I'll be more than happy to take up your queries over there. I keep on posting on a regular basis over there, almost on a weekly basis. I'm posting some new knowledge on this topic. And it's more of a passion for me to work on the cusp of sustainability and innovation. Thank you so much. I'm also very, very pleased that such a big group is here today. And particularly with LXI over here, I'm more than really pleased to. And thank you. Thanks a lot to Ashwani and Viksha, Meka, and the entire team from Esprit who have really made sure that these people have really worked hard with me for last 3-4 days, at least more than a week, last 1 week, to really make the presentations, everything. And I was really happy that I didn't have to work much, but these people did all the research for me, made all the presentations for me, and really very closely coordinated. I really appreciate your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. I hope everybody had a very good and fruitful discussion. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.